9 experienced hikers leave the safety of their campsite and wander off into the frozen woods. Why would they do such a thing? On this episode of Speaking of Spirits, we discuss the Daytlov Pass incident.
Hi everybody, this is Colleen with Speaking of Spirits, and I've got a bunch of sidekicks with me today. Got Tim.
Woo!
Carrie.
Hello.
Katie.
Hello.
So we introduced Tim last time, even though he wasn't here, and we had to...
Yeah.
You'll listen to it,
That
Tim.
was tragic.
Well, I was there in spirit.
You were there in spirit. We have a really interesting case, and I'm super excited about this one, because it's the Daytlov Pass in Russia. And I'm sure most of the paranormal people into weird things have heard of this. So, and we are recording again at my house, so if you hear dogs, that's why. We have dogs. So this incident took place over February 1st and 2nd, 1959.
Can I interrupt real quick?
Yeah.
So do you have the same issue with Yeti that you do with Sasquatch?
Like they've never found one?
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, pretty much.
All right, just making sure.
Yeah.
He's compiling evidence. Over there.
Yeah. Tim's the Squatch guy. So, several cameras were found in a tent, and one was found on a hiker's body when the bodies were finally found. That documented this trek, right? What this was a group of hikers from a university who were very, very experienced. A lot of them had hiked together and made several expeditions together. There was one hiker that joined them at the last minute, and he had been in the Russian army. Very experienced hiker as well. They got together and they decided they wanted to go over this pass. I don't know why. In the middle of winter. I don't know. It just doesn't seem like the greatest idea to me. But, you know, I'm not into this. So I have a hard enough time cleaning my barn when it's -10. I don't want to go trekking through the mountains.
So these people are already crazy.
Yeah,
Just-
so they're already
just
crazy.
'cause.
But they were very, very experienced. They knew what they were doing, and they had a path and a plan. Okay? They were skiers, hikers, expeditionists. Like I said, it took place over February 1st and 2nd, 1959. Temperatures in the area ranged from -10 to -30 degrees Fahrenheit. And they don't have North
cold.
Face in 1959. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah.
They don't have all of the
Heavy clothing.
the layers that we have that are wicking your sweat and doing all that. So
Gear was below subpar.
oh yeah, and boots.
Chicken feathers work.
Yeah. So the hike was related to Category 3 trek, which at its time was the highest category of a hike. All 10 hikers and skiers were accomplished. They were from the Polytechnic Institute. I'll edit that out. They were from the Polytech Institute of Yekaterinburg. Yeah, sounds good, huh? The leader, I think, of the expedition was a sports instructor, or no, he was the soldier who fought in World War II. He was the sports instructor. So they head out to do this mountaineering trek January 23rd. They're supposed to check in. They're supposed to be at a checkpoint at a particular date. Well, they never check in. So it was about 3 or 4 days after that check-in point that their family said, okay, something's wrong. We need to go look for them, right? A storm overtook the hikers, and they ended up hiking to the base of a mountain called Dead Mountain. Right?
How convenient.
How convenient. Yeah. Which was off their projected course.
Let's camp here.
Yeah.
That's not ominous.
Yeah. So, and again, they had compasses and all that. Carrie's choking to death. They had compasses. They had all of the stuff for a trek, but it just wasn't. The storm that overtook them was really, really serious. So, here's the bizarre details of what was found. The group's shoes and hiking boots were in a heap outside the tent. None of them had any footwear on, and they were piled up. They weren't in a tent. If you're in a storm, and they had one tent for all of the people, so they were huddled, that's what they're for body warmth, they're going to stay together, stay warm. Why would you take your shoes off and put them outside the tent in a pile where it's going to get snow?
Yeah.
Okay.
They got wet and they were taking them off. They're not going to put
No,
them
you'd leave them in the tent. You'd leave them in the tent. There was no blood inside or outside the tent. There are theories that there was an avalanche that killed them, but the tent was intact.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, the tent was intact.
Love that.
Their food, their clothing, and their personal effects were intact inside the tent as well. They left everything. They were found barefoot. Okay?
Oh, that is so weird.
When the search and rescue team found the tent, like I said, they found it intact but cut open from the inside. That's what they theorize anyway. I don't know how you'd know that, but they theorized it was cut open from the inside. I guess maybe the way, when you're going out through a piece, a cut in a material, it's going to push out or something. I don't know.
The way the fibers are ripped, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. I'm thinking. The group fled their tents with hardly any clothing on in these sub-zero temperatures. Only barefoot prints led away from the tents when the bodies were found. None of them wore shoes. So they did leave. They left on foot, all together, and they hiked almost a mile to the tree line, barefoot, in sub-zero temperatures, with hardly any clothing on. Some of them were found basically nude. They had underwear on.
I was going to say, wasn't a couple of them didn't have clothes on?
Yeah, well, they weren't completely nude, but I'll get into that. So, when the bodies were found, they found that 6 died there was 10 people now. 6 died of hypothermia. 3 had really traumatic physical trauma, like they had been beaten to death, and 1 had their tongue cut out.
Cut out?
Cut out. Like even the muscle of the tongue was removed. Not just the tongue, the muscle. We know that the team deviated from their project path and drifted west when they lost their sense of direction in the storm. When the rescue team found 8 or 9 sets of barefoot tracks in the snow. They didn't find all 10. The tracks led to the trees almost a mile away. 2 bodies were found near an extinguished fire. Okay? They were shoeless and wearing only light clothing. So they had like t-shirts on in their upper body and had underwear on and nothing else. They were bare-legged and shoeless. Both of their hands were burned, and I think their feet as well, probably from sticking them in the fire to try to warm them up. So they had blisters from the fire on their hands. Then they found 3 bodies under the cedar trees, but in a row. And one of the hypotheses was, and they were all facing up the mountain, that they were trying to get back to the tent. That whatever happened that forced them out of the tent, they realized they were in some serious danger. We better get back to the tent because they were so exposed in this raging storm. So they were found in a line, and there's actually a map online that shows here. There's a map of how the bodies were found, so you guys can look this up online. But how they were found in there, how they were facing, what direction they were facing.
Gosh.
So the researchers or the rescuers believe that they were trying to get back to the tent and they just died of hypothermia one after another in this line. One of the trees had damage, like where when these 3 hikers were found, they had stripped branches. It looked like they had stripped branches either to try to climb it, but more than likely to bring it down for the fire. But everybody knows that it's really hard to burn green wood.
Yeah.
It's really, really hard.
Right.
So one of the bodies had, this is interesting, gray foam coming from its right cheek.
Great
Like
foam.
out of the cheek. Gray foam. Can't explain that. They've never been able to explain it. And a gray liquid coming from the mouth.
Was there drug test done on
Yeah.
this? Okay, so they... Okay.
No drugs.
No drugs were involved
found.
in this.
One of them had, the 3 in this line had head injuries consistent with someone falling and hitting their head several times. But there was no, when you dig into it and you keep digging through all of the different websites and you look at there's autopsy reports that were released, there's all kinds of information that was released. There were and there's photos, there didn't look like there was any evidence of fighting in the snow around those 3. They were just dead in a line. 2 bodies were found dressed in each other's clothing. 2 of these 3. So it could have been that one person died. The other 2 were like, let's strip the clothing as much as we can to try to stay alive. We need to get back to the tent, and they couldn't. And then they died, Mm-hmm. 2 months later, the last of the hikers were found under 20 feet of snow. That's how much snows in this place.
So sad.
So it was not an avalanche. There was no damage to the tree line, tents intact. They were found under 20 feet of snow. I mean, it really snows through here. One of these bodies, like we said, had the tongue removed completely with muscle, not just the tongue cut out.
Right.
And the lips were gone, like surgically gone, not like a critter
Right. They
pulled
couldn't
them
figure
off.
out.
And a portion of her skull bone was missing.
Her skull bone?
Skull bone was missing. No other damage to the body at all. There was no scavenge marks on any of the bodies, like from wolves
From
or anything.
animals, yeah.
All the bodies had the same contents, suggesting they shared the last meal. So that night, and the death then indicated that they died around 2 a.m. February 2nd. What would drive you out of a tent at 2 a.m. in a raging storm, barefoot, naked, into trees a mile away? That's what I want to know. What would do that to you? Mm-hmm. The only thing that would do that to me was a grizzly, and I can't run, so I'm just going to curl up in a ball and die. I can't, you know what I mean? I am the slowest person that everybody invites to a hike. So,
welcome to my world.
The wounds of the last 4, the ones that found under the snow, indicate that there was a violent struggle. These 4 were found near a makeshift snow shelter they were building. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever made a snow cave, but we used to do that in the Sierras, and it was pretty toasty warm in there.
Yeah.
The wounds on those bodies were not thought to be from animals scavenging the bodies. Some of those wounds were blunt force trauma. And then again, tongue. No external surface wounds matched up with their internal wounds when they did the autopsy. So it's not like they had bruised ribs and then broken ribs.
Right.
Or, bruising along the rib, on
Right,
the
like
outside
where-
and then broken ribs on the inside. None of the inside trauma matched the outside trauma, which they can't explain.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that.
Yeah,
And
that's-
They had the weird...
Yeah.
spooky-
Clothing on 2 of these bodies were radioactive.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, they have not been able to explain that. They completely went, oh, yeah, well, it's okay. And never said another word
But
about
only
it.
on 2 of the 10
Only
bodies.
on 2 of the 10.
Was either one of those the bodies with the tongues and the skull?
No. It was
It was 2
female.
different bodies.
Yeah.
2 different
Yeah.
bodies. Okay.
So autopsies indicate none of the group had been drinking, nor did they consume any drugs during the autopsy.
So there was no hallucinating
Nope.
going on the mountain,
Nope.
unless it was natural hallucinogenics.
But they would have been in the bloodstream because they all died pretty quickly after ingesting this last meal together. So you would think that whatever was in there.
Right. Wouldn't have happened.
The 6 that were found fairly quickly. It was the last 4 that were found 2 months later. So you would anticipate that more than likely, I don't know. Well, shoot, some drugs stay in your they can
Yeah.
exhume bodies and test for arsenic now and things like that, and it's still there. So
Right.
Yeah.
here's some of the theories. There's 2 tribes that live close to them, where this happened. One is the local Manzai tribesmen. They thought, some people theorize, well, the tribesmen killed them, because they're protecting their mountain. But this was ruled out because this tribe is known to be really peaceful, and they actually take people on expeditions. There's never been any record of them attacking anybody. That's not, they're peaceful people. And they're not actually known to live right in that area. And nor is it considered a sacred area. And why would they go in 30 degree below temperatures in a snowstorm?
For 10 people.
And the other thing was, there's another tribe called the Khanty tribe. And they're also known not to live right there. And they're not hostile. Same thing. Very peaceful people. And people also said, look, if it was tribes, people, why wouldn't they go get all their food that was left in the tent? Because they had a cache of food with them.
Right.
So you would think, well, I'm going to scavenge anything that they had and take it with us so we could use it for our people. But they didn't. Everything was intact.
And they probably didn't have nuclear technology.
Who, the tribes?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Radioactive
exactly.
clothing. I mean, it really is really odd. So, theory of the avalanche. The degree of this mountain is 18 degrees. The slope where they were doesn't fit the avalanche theory. There's not been a recorded avalanche on this slope or this area. There's no physical evidence of the avalanche. The tent was intact. Everything was there. The tree line was not disrupted in any way.
No broken trees.
No broken trees. So they said no. They've kind of ruled it out. Even though there's some people that say, well, it could have been this kind of avalanche or that kind of avalanche. The tent was intact.
The tent would have been gone.
The tent would have been gone.
Yeah.
I mean,
or at least covered with snow.
Yeah, there was, when you see pictures of the tent, there was a little bit of snow on the top, like it had sunk in a little bit. But the ends of it were still roped down and still pegged in, and the tent
So
was
if they'd have
intact.
stayed inside the tent, they'd have been fine.
Well, yeah, but we don't know what drove them out of the tent.
Right.
So maybe they wouldn't.
I know, right? And I was like, what happened? Hypothermic thinking. This is a theory. This is where irrational thinking overtook the group. Like they had gotten into such a state of hypothermia, all of them, that they weren't making sense anymore. And maybe one of them said, we got to get out of here, man. And then they all went, okay, yeah, let's get out of here. You're huddled together. There's 10 people. I get it. You're cold. I wouldn't. I can't imagine trying to survive with that kind of gear in that kind of temperature. But you would think one or two of them would have said, "Screw you! I'm staying in the tent, man."
Well, you could say that if you weren't an experienced climber.
Exactly. These people were very experienced mountaineers.
Yeah.
These weren't newbies.
You'd think they would, like, I have heard about, like, the hypothermia, and you can kind of go a little crazy, and then when you hit, like, almost death, you get really hot, and so people will rip their clothes off, so I've heard that part of the theory, but again, they would have prepared mentally for that.
I would have thought, I would have thought. So, there's a theory that there was an argument in the group that got out of hand, but this was dismissed by people who knew the group, because the only new person to the group was the army guy. The physical instructor. He was the only one not known to the group, but he knew them. Like everybody else in the group had mini hikes together, or treks, mini mountains together. So they're like, no, they all got along really great. So the only oddball was the army guy. So there's a theory about him, though. Gets weird. Gets weird. Okay. There's a theory of the Russian Yeti called a mink killed the group. So we don't know.
Facts. Yeah, I'm interested to hear.
I have a little money on that, and then the rest of the money's on aliens.
Yeah, well,
Always aliens.
here's another interesting thing. 9 of the bodies were found with orange skin.
What?
All their skin had turned orange. Hypothermia, when you freeze to death, your skin turns black, typically.
Right.
Right, because everything dies.
Orange, they were orange. And they can't explain that either. Their skin was orange. And then you had the gray stuff oozing from the one person. So, here's...
That is so eerie.
I know. The whole thing is like,
up.
you chase one theory and you're like, okay, that sounds plausible. And then you start looking through things and you're like, wait a minute, what? Orange? Why are they orange? And why are 2 radioactive? And what's going on? Okay, here's another theory. UFOs or Russian weapons testing. this sounds a little plausible, and let me tell you why. So, a group of hikers that were 50 kilometers away from this group. Can you believe there's 2 groups hiking through this shit? That's what I can't believe.
What a weekend to pick.
I know, right?
Russians
There
are
was-
crazy. I just want to mention
They
that.
just hike with their bottles of vodka.
I know,
right?
This will keep us warm.
They were hiking 50 kilometers away from this group that were killed. And they said during that night they saw strange orange orbs floating around the sky that night. And they actually took pictures of them. And unfortunately, the photos are black and white, but these are the photos. And the group that died also took photos of those orbs. They were
did
on the
not.
cameras.
They
So there
did
was
not.
2 cameras. One of the guys died with the camera around his neck. So he was still taking pictures as they're dying. And there was 1 camera found in the tent. And they developed all that film. And those orange orbs were on the camera.
Spooky.
They also heard, this group that was 50 kilometers away, heard odd noises like that of an odd weapon. And they couldn't, they said, we don't know what this is. We don't know what it was, but it was a really odd weapon sound. They hypothesized that the noise of the weapon drove the hikers from their tents in a panic, because they're like, well, what the hell is out there? And what, somebody's aiming at us? Or maybe there was some kind of weapon blast going on around them or something that then got covered up in the snow and they took off, right? Half-clothed, the hikers attempt to take shelter in the tree line. They believe the third group of hikers, the one with the missing tongue, eyes, and skull bone and missing lips, took a direct hit from this mysterious object. Like, is it some kind of new, at the time, advanced weapons that the Russians were
And one of
testing?
the orbs hitting
Yeah, her.
her.
It was a female that was, yeah. The group who saw the orange orbs, like we said, took pictures, but considering photographic technology at the time, pictures are pretty bad. I mean, they're pretty bad. But could these orange orbs been weapons exploding, and could this explain the injuries of the last 4 that had nothing consistent, internal injuries to external injuries? It was very, very odd. So that almost sounds like the most plausible explanation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
The chief investigator, his name was Lev Ivanov. He said, I suspected at the time, and I'm almost sure now, that these bright flying spears had a direct connection to the group's death. But his statements were scrubbed from all of the official documents. We are talking Russians here.
Yeah.
So he made the statement, and then they started trying to scrub it, but it was out there by then. There's another theory called infrasound.
Okay, that's what I was thinking of. But then, after the whole orange skin thing,
That doesn't.
I'm like,
There's so many things. It's like, well, that, but then this. Yeah.
Yeah.
So infrasound is where there's a unique wind pattern in this particular area, and it happens in certain places on the planet where it creates a sound that can create panic. So the sound can wrap through this pass, and they actually, they have recordings of the infrasound at this pass where these hikers died, and you can listen to it online. And it's spooky shit. We did a podcast like 2 years ago on these odd noises that people have been hearing. It's kind of like that. These real weird hummings and what it does is noise at 7 cycles per second can cause symptoms along with paranoia.
Yeah.
And they're
I can see
wondering
that.
did they get in here, the storm hit, the wind hit, and they went, oh God, and they heard this noise, drove them out of the tent in a panic because they didn't know what it was. Doesn't explain the injuries though.
No.
Yeah,
Or the orange skin, or the gray foam stuff, or missing body parts. Why would that happen, right?
And some of this could, like, multiple theories could play a role. Like this sound could have driven them out of the tent, and then the orbs, and then...
Yep. There's a gravity fluctuation theory. Yeah.
Oh.
I
Yes.
thought about that too, and I was like...
It's considered one of the most scientific of the theories, though. So, professor and physicist German Urschenko claim that the 9 hikers were the victims of gravity fluctuation, which is a set of circumstances, including the location, which causes external gravity to literally fluctuate. And he's a physicist.
No thanks.
Yeah, right?
Oh no.
According to Urshenko, he believes that a significant external pressure literally threw the hikers out of the tent. Like this gravity fluctuation happens and poof, they're pushed out of the tent. He would explain it as a corridor forming in and around the valleys of the land. As the campers were getting ready to settle down for the night, they would suddenly find themselves lifted off the ground and dragged into this corridor. So they had no control over leaving the tent. They were like sucked out of the tent, like in a vortex kind of thing. He continues that this explains the damage to the tent from the inside, as the air pressure inside the tent was significantly higher than the air pressure outside of the tent. The hikers would, in theory, at least have raced through the air towards the tree line, which would also explain some of the internal injuries to at least 4 of the hikers, those last 4.
Fair.
Maybe they were already outside. Maybe they were taking a leak. I don't know. You know what I'm saying?
That's a terrible way to go.
that's...
You never know, right? So
I still find it weird that the tent was there. Like, yes, the tent is staked down to withstand, like, strong wind. But if you think about 10 bodies flying through a tent, that's a lot of weight and a lot of speed.
true.
And the tent is still just chilling.
It's amazing how many times this last month that I've gotten into deep conversations about gravity.
Really?
How does that always happen?
I don't know. and it all boils down to a mysterious force.
Yeah.
Like, whatever, okay.
So in 2019, Russia opened another investigation because people are not letting this go. They're like, what the
They want
hell
answers.
happened?
For real.
So now they're only entertaining 3 theories.
Well, that's because of a PlayStation game. Actually, a video game. It was loosely based off of all of this.
Oh, really?
Loosely. But it was enough that everybody was really curious, and so they used the old internets and like, what happened? And
Oh,
it
I
was
didn't
this
know
big-
that.
Re-sparked public interest.
So
Wow.
gamers everywhere unite, and all of a sudden, Russia gets to moving.
So do
Wow.
we know the name of the game?
Yeah, that's a Russian word. It starts with a K. It was like Kaltov or something like this.
Interesting.
Groovy.
Mm-hmm.
So right now they're entertaining only 3. Well, at the time, 2019, they entertained avalanche, like a snow slab, but again, tent's intact. Shoes in a mound outside the tent. All of the food's in the tent. Blah blah blah. Oh, that's my computer again going nuts. A snow slab, which is kind of like an avalanche, but again, for the reasons we just outlined, doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
Or a hurricane, which I didn't know could happen in this area.
It would have to be a completely different name,
Yeah,
because I said so.
yeah.
Because it just doesn't make sense.
So in 2020, they closed the case yet again with no answers. So, let's go to the UFO theory again, because that sounds really interesting to me. I went back and I started looking at UFO sightings over this particular mountain or in this area, and there's a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot.
All the same thing, like the orange.
Well, let me tell you. So a few years ago, there was an exploration into some gold deposits. Russia has a lot of gold.
Oh, yeah, they do.
A lot of gold. I personally know somebody who was loaned $58 million. Personally know this guy. To open a diamond and gold mine. And he paid back that loan in 3 years.
I believe that.
Yeah. I mean, they have a lot of gold, diamonds, gems.
I need some of your friends.
Yeah, well, yeah. As they were digging for gold deposits, they found under 30 feet of soil, because they're doing borings, right? So they're going down and they're sampling the soil. Really, dog? And under 30 feet of soils and springs and other debris, they found molybdenum, which doesn't sound, okay, we mine for molybdenum in Nevada, so you're like, big deal. But here, it's interesting is that it was found under 30 feet of soil in an area that doesn't have molybdenum. And they found it. And the interesting thing about molybdenum, say it fast, really 3 times fast, it has a melting degree of over 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. It's really tough stuff. And they said that it's not a known mineral deposit in this area. And they couldn't figure out, it was like pieces of molybdenum. not like a ore seam, not something they could mine.
Huh.
So they're like, where did that come from? And it's buried under 30 feet of soil. So if you go and you look, I wanted to tell you about the theory about this Russian soldier. Yeah,
Is that him?
Yeah, him dead. Yeah. So his name was Alexander Zolotaryov. Okay, and yeah, so there was a group that believes that he was on the team to plant radioactive clothing on the team as a CIA operative during the Cold War.
Oh.
He's the oddball to the team. He didn't know it. He didn't know them. They didn't know him. He was an army guy, but was he also working for the CIA? And the radioactive clothing was planted. Doesn't explain the orange skin.
When did they find him, and what was he? The 2 months later, or was he early on?
Let me look, because we have a map of the bodies where they were found. Let me look. Oh yeah, he was one of the last 4 found. With the I don't know if he had the radioactive clothing, but he was in that last group of 4 found under the 20 feet of snow. 2 of them had radioactive clothing.
The 2.
Pretty good odds.
Yeah. So there was a theory that he was doing something with the CIA.
But still, what's
but I don't understand.
Out of the tent? Like,
huh?
I don't know. To me, it's still like, okay, but why would they flee the tent? Do you know what I'm saying?
I know. The whole thing just doesn't make sense. So they have this picture.
Or did they flee the tent because one of them was attacking somebody in the tent, so they were all trying to get out of the tent?
Maybe. I don't know.
But there's 10 of them.
And why were their shoes piled up in a heap outside the tent? That gets me.
Yeah.
I'm thinking it's not normal. I'm
And
thinking
what's
it's
weird
otherworldly.
too- yeah, and what's weird too is if you go into like Google Scholar and like specifically look at research-based articles, of course, again, you have to look at who's funding it, whatever. They all say that the most likely scientifically is the avalanche theory, right? They've recreated this small slope avalanche, whatever. But even after all that research, they still say it's inconclusive because of the injuries.
Right.
So it still comes down to the injuries.
So
they're all different injuries.
All different.
So
like,
bizarre.
they weren't tumbled in an avalanche.
When my biggest takeaway from the snow avalanche things is it was quite some time before things were found. Snow's quite the thing. It
Yeah.
piles up and blows and moves. So I was highly suspicious of that particular study.
Of the avalanche thing. Yeah. Well, the slope doesn't fit. No injuries to the tree line. No injuries to the tent.
The poles were intact.
The poles were intact. The ropes are there. Yeah, there's pictures of the tent. You can look at it online. There's a lot of photos, and the autopsy reports were completely. One Russian woman, she transcribed all of the autopsy reports, and has uploaded them to the internet so everybody could read them, and they're just bizarre. So. That's not conclusive. Nobody knows what happened to these 10 people. Nobody knows. And their injuries aren't consistent with avalanche. Some of them are. They have broken bones and whatnot, but I haven't seen an avalanche cut a tongue out or cut lips off or...
Plus, they would be buried under snow. All of them.
All of them, and they weren't.
Yeah, that's what's bizarre.
They were found pretty much in a line, down from the tent into the tree line.
They couldn't have escaped that fast either. That's a mile to go on foot. Through a storm.
Through a storm.
Sounds like my parents on their way to school 50 years ago.
Yeah, right?
And if the other hikers heard noises and seen the orbs.
Yeah, there was something
That
definitely
is
going
spooky.
on because they
Heard
odd noises and saw the orange orbs consistent with orange skin. So if there was...
So spooky.
Yeah, so if there was a Russian... If there was a UFO connection to it all, because UFOs have been sighted in this area a lot. If there was a weapon test of some sort, that would explain then the orange skin.
You ready for my tin hat scenario?
Yes.
Yes. This is my favorite portion of the program.
Yeah.
So, I tend to go down rabbit holes because it's what all the cool people do, I assure myself. And you know what's very interesting about the UFOs?
UFOs.
It seems like just about every expert, and I use the term loosely with quotations, expert, they blame alien interest on gold, the old AU. And they theorize that it has a lot to do with the components of gold and everything that you can do for it, and it's a vital part of their whatever you want to call it.
Could be.
So, I went diving down even more on that, and it was pretty cool how, like, if you look at the Roswell incident,
Yeah.
and you look at this incident, and you look at about 5 or 6 other ones that happened in between those, it seems like there's just so much cover-up that it hurts. It hurts your soul after a while. And I think that when it all boils down to it, it's all a cover-up for whatever happened. Da-da-da!
Yeah, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So this was 59.
Mm-hmm.
When was Roswell?
47.
Not that far apart.
And so, whilst I was looking into these things, it's amazing how infiltrated both the Russians and the Americans were. So, if I were to put my thinker cap on, what did these guys who infiltrated America take back to Russia? And what does that mean? What were they trying to do? Like, America was doing lots of cool things with Velcro. So,
Yeah.
what were the Russians doing with it?
Right.
And I think that the most logical route that I could come up with all of this is a little bit of everything. There's a whole lot of, what's the word? Non-truths that blew up to one thing. Lies, deceptions, and UFOs. Man, I'd read that book.
Boy, that'd be a good book.
Yeah.
Seriously.
I don't know. The whole incident is just fascinating to me. I just think I feel so bad for these people and
Their families.
their families.
Not getting any answers
I
of
know.
what actually happened to them.
I could think in Russia they're probably used to that.
Yeah.
But not getting any conclusive. And you know, why was my son orange when you found him, and what? How come he had radioactive clothing on? And it just,
What is radioactivity? Why was it there?
yeah, why was it there and nobody else? Their skin wasn't radioactive. Not all of them were radioactive.
Only
How
two.
come? What happened? And these people over here, not that far away, saw orange lights in the sky. So what was that about? And how come nobody's given us any answers? And
So to sum up, I'm sorry, I apologize. So to sum up my theory with the tinfoil hat on,
Okay.
it seems to me that whatever you want to say, the UFOs,
yeah,
aliens, whatever, ... get involved right when poo-poo's about to get real. So, I may be joining the classic conspiracy theorist that think that the aliens are trying to act in our best interest. But who am I? I don't know. I get my
World War
aluminum
II
from
is
the same
over at
grocery
this
store.
point in '59. So Korean War.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Korean War, right? Was 57 to something like that.
That was right around.
Yeah, it was my dad. Dad was in it. I'm trying to think. 55 to. It was only like 4 or 5 years. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe they're trying to stop whatever was happening.
From us blowing ourselves up.
Yeah. Well, I hope they can help this time.
Pretty please.
Anyway. If you have any thoughts on it, we'd love to hear them. Otherwise, this is Speaking of Spirits, and we are done with this conspiracy. And we look forward to you listening to the podcast and our next adventure.
You've been listening to Speaking of Spirits, powered by Pocatello Paranormal Research in Pocatello, Idaho. Thank you for joining us today. We're glad you could be here. If you're enjoying the podcast, please do us a favor and go to whatever platform you are listening to the podcast on and give us a review. We prefer the 5-star reviews. This helps us know how we're doing, and it helps others to find the podcast. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you on our next podcast.
Ha 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 ha!